We are slaying monsters.
Don't let the ghosts and the ghouls disturb you, darling.
We lost like a powerhouse. Not to start this really sad. I don't mean to start it sad. But it's something that is going to come up today anyway. So we lost a powerhouse in the cryptozoological community just this past week. Actually, as we're recording this, Joe Nickel has passed away. He was in his 80s. Our listeners are very familiar with Joe Nickel because, I mean, we talk about him a lot. He's very, very lovingly, we have joked about him because Joe Nickel, he was an investigator. He was a cryptozoologist. He did a lot of this stuff. And one of his favorite things, because he was very skeptical, so one of his favorite things was like, oh, it's an owl. And so much that he investigated was like, oh, a big thing at night flying, it's an owl. Mothman, owl.
Yeah, and I share his, I absolutely share his skepticism and his, I think he's right on.
100%. I was with friends once. They live out in the country, and they were telling me this story of how they heard this thing screeching like a banshee. Yeah. And I was like, that's an owl. And they know that, but they decided that it was a banshee. And I was like, yeah, no, it was an owl, 100%.
Yeah, that's
you live in the middle of the woods.
Yeah, I know, at night. And, yeah, we had friends too that said that. They were like, they showed us a video. They were like, we were terrified all night. And they showed us the video, and it was a screech owl. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's a screech owl. And they were like, oh my God, we were so scared. Well, I get it though, because it's creepy.
And if you don't
they sound terrifying.
They're scary.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, because you do think that an owl is going to be like, hoo, 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 but a screech owl's like, hoo, hoo, hoo.
No, it sounds like some weird fairy creature that wants to kill you.
Yeah,
you just freaked out our cat.
I know. Zer's like, what's going on? What's happening?
They also do those, like, sometimes when they do the swoops, they'll actually do, like, the screech. And it's very echoey and...
And at night, to see something like that flying around, like, you don't know how big things are. And owls are not the most graceful flyers. They're like because they're big, and so they're they look clumsy as they fly, and so they're very kind of awkward and ponderous in their movements. And I think because of that, a lot of times people think that they're bigger than they are. And that's why you get reports of Mothman that are like 6 feet tall or, 10-foot wingspan or something like that. Not that, I mean, owls are gigantic anyway. Mm-hmm. It can be.
And they can do that weird head thing. If you're seeing glowing eyes or something, it's going to move in weird ways.
Yeah, and red eyes at night. I mean, we get these reports all the time that cryptids have red eyes, and it's pretty much always an owl, except for the one time that it wasn't. EJ, do you remember that?
No.
Oh, that was the lizard man of Skateboard Swamp. And it wasn't an owl, it was the guy who was wearing glasses behind the car. And so the car's taillights were reflecting in his glasses and made it look like there was a creature with red eyes.
Cool.
Yeah.
I love that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Anyway. Hello.
Hello.
Hello. We're slaying monsters. We got Maddie J here.
Woohoo.
And we got Katie.
Hello.
Katie doesn't have to do an owl sound.
No.
I mean, you can if you want.
And I'm EJ. And but we are going to talk about Doc Shiels again today. And we're going to finish it up, right?
Yes.
This is episode 3.
Yeah, this is part 3 of Doc Shiels, the legendary magician and monster hunter. So in our last episode, part-time magician, surrealist artist Doc Shiels, Tony Shiels, he was embarking on this experiment to create some monsters, and he was doing it as an art project, you remember. So he's drawn this like surrealist artist community to him. They've all kind of migrated to these pubs in Cornwall where they're sitting around, they're drinking, they're socializing, And Shiels comes up with this idea, we should create some monsters. I want to get back to some of the old mythology that I grew up with, combine it with some of the magicians and the magic shows that I saw when I was a kid, and make this art project. So he claimed to be a wizard, and he faked a series of fairy photographs using his daughter and some model fairies that he had one of his buddies create. And then he created a new sea monster, Morgwar, the Cornish sea giant. And that was so successful that even Tim Dinsdale, renowned cryptozoologist, fell for this ruse and believed that it was a real creature. Shiels upped the act even more and attempted to lure Morgwar out of the depths of the sea. He did a whole public event, a stunt involving naked, or as they called themselves, sky-clad witches, and that whole thing kind of fell apart. He probably tried to make it fall apart. But yeah, he was trying to lure out all of these different monsters.
I think it's astounding to me that he sits in pubs and he lies at people's faces. It's a very intimate setting, because you have to think about it like it's a small town. It's intimate setting. It's when people are tend to be very truthful to each other. You know, especially with a little alcohol, things kind of just come out. And he is willing to sit there and continue the act by lying in people's faces that he knows, and that, like, you know what I mean? Like, it is performance art, and it is like he's tricking people, but it takes an extra special kind of personality to be able to sit down across a table in a pub and lie to people like that over and over and over again.
When you're drinking. Yeah.
When you're drinking.
Right.
Yeah.
I feel like, though, Matt, you said before he was sort of coy about it, right? So he wasn't exactly straight up lying to people. He was sort of lying by omission, lying by not responding in a way that people assumed he was responding, right? Like a little coy look. That person can interpret it however they would like to interpret it, but you, the speaker, have not actually given an answer explicitly one way or the other, you know? I feel like there was a lot of that going on from the way you've described it.
He liked to claim that he summoned the monsters by being in the right place. Not necessarily by actively summoning them. He just showed up at the places where he thought the monsters would be. So that was one of the things that he said. It's all about putting yourself in the right situation. But yeah, he didn't really lie a whole lot. Like there was the performance aspect to it.
Yeah.
But I fully believe that if he wasn't performing for Tim Dinsdale or somebody like that, he wasn't performing for the newspapers, he was just sitting in the pub, if somebody came over to him and said, "Hey, Tony, did you do this?" He'd be like, I mean, I'm not saying I did. I'm not saying I didn't. You know, I don't think he would have ever intentionally led people astray. He mostly just thought it was funny.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess it's like there are different tolerances by different people for where that line is, right? I'm sure there are plenty of people that would have said that he was just lying to people, and he sort of sees it as a trick that no one should believe in the first place. So the fact that they are, he's like, well, if you are so silly as to believe this thing that I'm making up, then that's on you.
Yeah.
Absolutely, because it's all magic to him, right? Again, it's like, I'm not actually making the coin disappear. If you think I'm making the coin disappear, I can't help you, you know?
Yeah.
It's kind of the same line of thinking. I'm not actually raising this sea monster from the ocean, but if you think that, you're too far gone for me to help you. So around this time, Shiels wrote to the Fortean Times about another mysterious creature. Now, according to him, two teenage girls named June and Vicky Melling, they'd been walking through a churchyard in Monan, close to where the skyclad ritual was supposed to take place. This is all in Shiels' backyard. And these girls saw a gigantic flying creature that flew over St. Monan and St. Stephen's Church in full view of them. They described it only as a, quote, feathered bird man. And it scared them so much that their father had to cut their holiday short and return home because the girls were just terrified and couldn't do anything after that. Shields explained that he heard this story because his reputation as a monster hunter gave the family enough reason to contact him. They found out about this monster hunter and they were like, oh, we should report this to him. And so he reported it to the Fortean Times. This mysterious flying monster reappeared on July 3rd, once again witnessed by two teenage girls, this time Sally Chapman and Barbara Perry. These two were camping when they saw a, quote, big owl with pointed ears as big as a man. This owlman, as they were calling it, had glowing red eyes and sharp talons.
So it's an owl.
I mean, it is funny because they just kind of say like, oh, big owl.
It's important to teach your kids about the raptors in the sky. It's important to take them to these little places when they're little and like show them this is the birds that are in the sky. You don't see them often, but they exist.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there are literally flying dinosaurs wandering around the world. So, did it look big and scary? Yes, and it is sometimes.
Yeah, it will fuck you up.
Oh,
It can fuck you up. Yeah. The crows in Southern California, I don't know if y'all have ever seen them. They are enormous. Enormous. You'll see it sitting on the top of a building, so quite far away from you, and it's like huge. If you saw one of those flying around at night and you didn't know what it was, it would have been terrifying, I think. And so, yeah, I just support that, EJ. Teach your children about wildlife.
Yes, it's important.
Well, okay. So in the girls' defense, right? This was all about a year or so after John Keel's Mothman Prophecies book was published. Okay. So, and I mean, our listeners, I'm sure, are very familiar with this story, but a flying humanoid was seen several times in the vicinity of Point Pleasant, West Virginia. About a month later, the Silver Bridge collapsed, and then all these rumors started to circulate that the Mothman was some kind of harbinger of doom or something like that. And so Mothmen, moth persons they continue to appear throughout the decades, and they're often like associated with these tragedies, which is probably one of the reasons that the girls were so upset about it, is that they were worried that seeing this was going to be some type of like curse or some tragedy was going to befall them. Mm-hmm. But Mothman as a cryptid, I don't know. Katie, are you familiar with the history of Mothman at all?
Yeah, I mean, in so much as what you just said, and
okay,
I'm familiar with the creature. I wouldn't say I'm like intimately more familiar than that.
Cool. Okay.
You don't have a Mothman tattoo, Katie?
No, sorry. Honestly, like, as I've said before, I really am like a paranormal UFO girly. So I am a little less into like the cryptozoology and those other creatures. Yeah. So I hear about them in so far as they sometimes overlap. Obviously, they run in those same circles. But yeah, just a little history about me and my knowledge of this world.
So Mothman as a cryptid traces its origins back to Gray Barker, who's a Fortean writer with kind of a knack for storytelling, but also for humor. And once again, we see this like Fortean cryptozoological shit bump up against people who are doing this kind of surrealist humor. So Barker, in the past, he had pranked UFO researchers by pretending to be a government agent and sending them letters on official letterhead. He got a copy of this. EJ, do you remember? We talked about this a long time ago. He got a copy of this letterhead and wrote them letters that were supposedly officially from the government saying things like, you can't continue to talk about these crafts, blah, 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 like all of this shit as if it was real. A contemporary of Barker's, James Mosley, later said, on one particular occasion in 1957, a young friend of Barker's, provided a pack of genuine official stationery from various government agencies. Barker and I wrote not 1, but 7 naughty letters that evening, emboldened by the evil of alcohol and fully enjoying the hilarity of this chance to throw long-term confusion into the UFO field.
How fun.
All of that is to say that Barker, not exactly a hard-hitting journalist and more of like a storytelling satirist, right? Mm-hmm. He saw these Fortean researchers, your Tim Dinsdales, that kind of person, as despicably credulous. And he took a lot of pride in duping them. And this is very similar to what Shiels is doing, too. Except kind of for a different reason. Like, Shiels is coming at it as an artistic exercise. Barker is approaching it more in this idea of, like, you guys are idiots, and I'm going to show you how idiotic you are. Barker's first book was The Silver Bridge. And that was the first time that we saw these winged creatures kind of connected to the collapse of the bridge in Point Pleasant. And that got parroted by John Keel, the author, who was himself, we could say, less than deliberate when it came to accuracy. Mm. Now, it should come as no surprise to our listeners that famous skeptic Joe Nickell has a theory as to what was seen in Point Pleasant, and he thinks it's an owl. Nickell believes that the 2 groups of teenage girls in Monin also saw an owl, and says, owls are probably roosting in the church tower there, which makes perfect sense. And EJ, like you said, teach your kids about owls, teach your kids about birds.
Absolutely. And Occam's razor. Right.
But it's cool that you bring up Occam's razor, because the real question that needs to be asked here, I think, is, did Owlman exist at all?
Are you really asking me?
I mean, sort of, yeah.
Yes, except what happened was he came in through a different dimension, the same dimension that Bigfoot uses. So if you really want to know the truth,
yeah,
we can have a whole podcast about that on my other channel.
The quantum physics podcast.
Exactly.
Yeah, the experience. It has to be an experience.
Yeah, the quantum experience.
You just kind of I'm just asking questions.
Yeah.
I mean, how do you mean, Matt? Are you asking, like, did Owlman exist as a cryptozoological character at this time, or?
Well, did the sightings actually happen? Because remember Mary F., who was the original person who saw Morgwar, the sea serpent, or sea giant. She wasn't real. The only Mary F. that they could find was some poor nun in a convent somewhere who had no idea what was going on. She was created by Doc Shiels. And so the question that I think needs to be asked before we even start to figure out what Owlman is did these sightings ever actually happen? Like, was there ever a ground zero of an Owlman at all?
It's a good question.
Oh, interesting. So what I asked was kind of on that track. Prior to these sightings, there is no mention of Owlman.
Nothing. No. Now, what will happen sometimes is after these sightings in the 70s, people will then go back and recontextualize some strange birds in the sky that were seen around Cornwall, whatever. Mm-hmm. But that's only after the Owlman sightings came out, and that's because people are using Owlman as a context to recontextualize those sightings and retrofitting those sightings into Owlman mythos. And now you've developed it. Mm. But it wasn't like in the 50s people were seeing Owlman. Didn't happen. So this is one of the like nuanced little stumbling blocks when it comes to skeptical investigation and this research is like, first you have to look at the thing and say, is there anything worth investigating here? Or are we just following the same track that the paranormal investigators are? Because sometimes you find out there's nothing. But this is one of the ways that Shields was able to continue to move forward with everything for so long, because nobody sat down and said, let's find out if Doc Shiels himself is telling the truth. Everyone was always like, oh, so he saw these animals. I wonder what they could be. Let's find real logical explanations for what these animals are. But they never existed in the first place.
And we don't even know if these people actually saw these owls in the first place.
Right.
This could all be another Mary F. situation.
As far as I am aware, none of these people have ever actually come forward in the public.
Okay.
They've only reported their sightings to Doc Shiels.
Okay.
Oh, okay. That's an extra piece of it that I didn't realize when you first relayed the story.
Yeah.
That Doc Shiels is saying that these teenage girls had these sightings. I guess, at least for the first one, I thought that they had seen it and, it was in the paper or something. And then they also talked to Doc Shiels, but no.
No, he wrote to the Fortean Times and said, "This has been presented to me because I am a monster hunter."
Oh, wow.
As an established monster
So it's Mary
hunter.
F. all over again.
It's Mary F. all over again, yeah.
It's interesting that he didn't pick something more extravagant than
Why?
an owl. Well, I mean, it's an owl, clearly, and it's described like an owl.
Well, no, it's a big flying owlman.
I guess so. I guess if I was completely making something up from the ground floor, it would be more exciting than an owl man. It would be like, because people could say, oh, it was an owl, though. So you want to say something else. You want to say, like, it's a flying octopus.
Oh. Hold that thought, EJ.
Okay.
You hold that thought.
Oh, good. Okay.
So, by 1977, Shiels has got his eye on the big one, the Scottish lake monster known as Nessie. Now, he had been to Loch Ness in the 50s, and all the way back then, he got this idea of creating a mythology around the monster. And in fact, he had even come up with a phrase to describe the experiment, or the surrealist art exercise that he was doing. He called it monster mind. If we think in terms of art's language, the fairies, Morgwar, Owlman, were all his studies for this great creation. This magical summoning of the Loch Ness Monster that he's calling this monster mind experiment. In February of 1977, the Daily Mail, which is a newspaper that is not really known for their outstanding journalism and their journalistic integrity, they published an article titled "Shy Nessie Sends Her Relatives." And appearing in this article, now calling himself a telepathist, Doc Shiels led a team of international psychics and claimed that they were engaged in a 3-day-long collective meditation at sites all over the world. This multinational effort was supposed to focus. They were each going to focus their combined psychic energy on Loch Ness and attempt to lure Nessie out of hiding. Allegedly, on the summoning day, Shields was at Loch Ness and he was chanting, and probably he has like a kind of like a bar on that he likes to bang on the side of the lake, the Irish drum, with his wizards and witches there. Now, all over the rest of the world, there were these other psychics, these other magical practitioners who were performing their own personal rituals, trying to get Nessie to show themselves. Despite the effort, they were unsuccessful, guys. It didn't work.
Oh my gosh, I can't believe it.
God.
Yeah. But apparently there were some side effects. So this is all according to this Daily Mail article. The India-based psychic named Jadu Chandral claimed to have accidentally summoned a 50-foot tall monster in a Russian lake, and embarrassingly explained that the monster was, quote, a little bit off target.
Wow. What a fuck up.
Uh-huh.
Fired immediately.
Get your
Fire
shit
that
together.
guy.
Here's what I love about this. I feel like it's similar to the spoon bending guy who was like, oh, I'm just tired today and I can't make anything happen.
Yes.
He's like, oopsies, I summoned a monster, but it's in a lake far away that no one saw. It just miscalculated because it gives the appearance of success, but mistake versus just complete, they aren't able to do this.
Well,
Yes.
do you remember the BBC interview with him? He attempted to summon Morgwar. Shields attempted to summon Morgwar, but it happened on the other side of the channel, and he was like, oh, damn it.
Yes.
It's exactly the same thing.
Yes. Now, did this guy exist?
Probably not.
See, that's the thing. I don't think aliens really existed.
Oh my God, I didn't even think. See, he's fooling me, and I'm not, and I'm here in the story.
This is it again, right? Like, did anybody actually see owls? Did anybody actually exist and try to summon a monster? Right?
Yeah.
No, I was just going to say the owlman thing is truly wild to me because I know about owlman, obviously, as a creature, and the fact that it was created by Doc Shiels probably is, like, wild to me. I'm learning something new.
Owlman, not Mothman. Mothman wasn't created by Doc Shiels, but Owlman, Doc Shiels,
Owlman.
totally. Yep. Now there was one real American psychic, it's a real person named David Hoy, who attempted to psychically bond with a dolphin for the experiment. And his intention was to send the dolphin to Loch Ness, where it would act as a liaison between himself and Nessie and convince the Loch Ness Monster to surface.
This is so harebrained.
The Daily Mail doesn't actually say if the integration with the dolphin was successful, but I kind of suspect that it wasn't, because obviously Nessie didn't show themselves. But David Hoy was a real mentalist and a magician. He later claimed that his summoning ritual ended with a psychic backlash that was so powerful it caused a heart attack, which is why he didn't do it again. See, and you see this, right? It's like he participated in Shiels' little monster mind experiment, went along with it, crafted a perfect story why he would never do it again, and then just disappeared. The Indian psychic, Chandral, suffered an even worse fate, I think, because he just disappeared from the face of the earth, and nobody ever heard from him again.
Where could he have possibly gone?
Maybe he's the creature in Russia right now.
Maybe.
He's swimming around in a lake.
Yeah.
Yeah. The thing is, Doc Shiels, despite all of these appearances, he doesn't really do stuff off the cuff. But he's really good at giving you the impression that he does. Like, this is just some harebrained idea that he came up with. It was like, we should all focus our psychic energy. And it's such a, like, hippie-ish kind of idea, too, you know? But this was very deliberate. This article was all part of his Monster Mind plan, and it was laying the groundwork for the next stage of the act, which was him actually photographing the Loch Ness Monster. But first, he needs to put himself as this authority, this central figure in Loch Ness Monster hunting, which is what he's doing now. That summer, 1977, Shiels was on holiday in Loch Ness. And while strolling along the shore, probably with a shot or two of scotch in him, Shiels came upon Urquhart Castle on the western shore of the loch. You've probably all seen this. It's the ruins of a castle. Used to be owned by the Grants and was partially destroyed in the 17th century to prevent the Jacobites from taking it over.
Oh, yeah, that one. Totally. Yep. Got that one.
It's in all of the pictures of
all
Loch
that.
Ness. I
I know.
okay.
No, I know.
I know it. I've seen many pictures of Loch Ness. Anyway, it's very picturesque, right? Doc Shiels is walking through this castle. Again, there's such an idea of a Merlin, a wizard kind of thing. He's walking through the ruins of this castle, standing at the top of them, and he claimed to spot something in the water below him. Now, luckily, he had been photographing the ruins, and he had his camera ready this time. He grabbed it, and he snapped 2 pictures before the creature disappeared below the water's surface. He said, "I stood there mesmerized by the brief, dreamlike vision, my heart beating rapidly, hands shaking as I lowered the camera, whispering expletives, ecstatic." June 9th, 1977, the Daily Mirror ran Shiels' photo on the front page with the headline, "Up for the Jubilee, Nessie," because this was an allusion to the Queen's Silver Jubilee that same year. This photograph is one of the first Loch Ness Monster photos in color, and probably, I'd say, one of the most breathtaking since the surgeon's photograph in 1934. When you look at it, you see It's got a head, a neck, very clear, open mouth on the head. You can see like the white interior of the mouth. The skin of the neck is dark brown. There's a lighter stripe running down the inside of the neck, like kind of underneath the jaw of the monster. You can see the reflection in the water below, and there's this kind of weird white blob at the base of the monster's neck where it connects with the waterline. The second photo is in profile, and the mouth is now either like strangely closed or kind of looks like it's not very deep. And in that photo, the white dot at the base is even more pronounced. I don't even know if I can say how much these photos took the cryptozoology field by storm. Every book about Loch Ness monsters, or really any water monsters, suddenly they had this photograph. Tim Dinsdale, who had been so invested in Morgwar in our last episode, he even used this as the cover for his 4th edition Loch Ness Monster book. This poor man, this poor guy.
Wow. I have a question.
Yeah.
Where in Doc Shiels' puppet friend Michael, where are we in his timeline? So this is 1977. Is he working for Jim Henson yet? Like, where is he?
I don't think
What's
he
he
started.
doing?
Yeah, I don't think he started working for Jim Henson until the early 80s. So as far as I know, he's still in Cornwall. It's interesting that you mention him. We'll be getting back to him shortly.
Okay. Yeah.
I will say, Michael McCormick, the puppeteer, did not create this creature.
Okay. We know that for certain?
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay. I don't know. I'm just saying the way in that photo, if you're thinking of it as something someone might have made,
Yeah.
the mouth is very like Jim Henson Muppet-esque. Like the way that it's shaped and like the way that the interior is lighter than the outside. I don't know. To me, it just looks like, you know, Kermit the Frog or one of the other Muppets, like with its mouth open. It's got that kind of quality to it. And that's why I was curious about him.
So it's funny you mentioned that. In a lot of cryptozoological circles, they call it the Loch Ness Muppet.
Wow.
Because it looks like a Muppet. Like, it really does.
It does.
There is certainly an argument that is somebody who had like a long sock on their hand, or maybe not a sock, but like a sock puppet on their hand that was like, hey, I'm underwater and I'm, you know, got my hand talking above the surface. That's what it looks like. I think it's easy to see why this was so captivating for people. Because unlike Shiels' early photos, or I mean, really any photo of the Loch Ness Monster that you see, this one's actually pretty clear. And it backed up biology that had been established 40 or so years earlier by the surgeon's photograph. And it landed at a time when Nessie was kind of making a comeback in the media, thanks to Robert Rines and his underwater cameras. So we have to take a little diversion here and talk about Robert Rines. Now, he is a lawyer, he's an MIT graduate, and his entire story is way too complex to get into in just this little section we're going to give him. But he is a very famous Loch Ness Monster Loch Ness explorer, and we have to talk about him so you kind of understand culturally where cryptozoology and Loch Ness investigation was at the time, to understand why Shields was able to capitalize on it so well. In the 1970s, the Loch Ness Investigation Bureau partnered with the Academy of Applied Sciences in an effort to get more funding and more boots on the ground in search of the monster. Running the Academy of Applied Sciences was a man named Robert Rines, who was an American inventor. And he arrived on Loch Ness in 1972 and brought an underwater time-lapse camera and strobe light. These he attached to a sonar probe and sent them down taking photos of Loch Ness underwater. Rines and his crew came out with 200 photographs. 3 of these contained what he called spectacular evidence. These photos showed a gigantic flipper or a fin that was kind of lit against the murky blackness, and were accompanied with sonar data from a remote vehicle which confirmed that they had been taken after encountering a, quote, large marine mammal. So Rines comes away with these photos of what he believes is a flipper or a fin, believes that it's connected to some large mammal. He contacted Loch Ness expert Tim Dinsdale, who had been duped by Doc Shiels before, who's continuing to push this theory of the plesiosaur. Mm-hmm. It's a plesiosaur, it's got a long neck, it's got fins. Mm-hmm. Dinsdale's jumping on anything that confirms this theory. So Dinsdale takes the photos to the British Natural History Museum, and Smithsonian professor George Zug, a herpetologist and biologist, analyzed the photos and said they were of a flipper-like appendage protruding from the side of a robust body. So Robert Rines is like, this is fucking great. This is the evidence that we've been looking for. And he published in Nature, the magazine Nature, in 1975. And he claimed that the flipper photograph was evidence of a new species, which, this is Nature. This is one of the most renowned magazines, renowned science magazines in the world, right? He claimed that this was now the scientific name Necitaris rhombopteryx. Almost immediately, paleontologists started rebutting the article and said, this is not what plesiosaur flippers look like.
Also, like, how did Nature even publish this? I mean, don't get me wrong. I know a bunch of crap is published in peer-reviewed journals, like, all the time.
Yeah.
But I just don't understand. If you're going to claim there's a new species, usually there needs to be evidence against which you're basing this. Like, we know this can't be a random lake seal or, like, a random dolphin or whatever it potentially could be.
Or
we know
a
it's not
leaf.
these other or a leaf or like something totally normal.
Yeah.
A totally normal lake animal where the fin is like too close to the camera or something like that. I'm so curious how this got into Nature, but I'm glad someone immediately rebutted it.
It's crazy. So in 1975, there was a period of time where the Loch Ness Monster was in fucking Nature. And this is the scenario that Doc Shiels is walking into. The major issue here is actually less about what he photographed and more what he did to the prints after he photographed them. When the original negatives were released upon the request of researchers, they looked like nothing. Rines and his photographic team had done such a substantial alteration to the contrast and defining the edges of the flipper that they basically made the shape of this flipper from just a couple of ripples in front of the camera. The original photos are just kind of blobs of nothing.
And do we know for sure where those were taken?
They were taken in Loch Ness.
They really were? Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Dick Rayner, who is another longtime Loch Ness researcher, compared the raw flipper photo to a test shot of the bottom of the loch from the same expedition, just the sandy, kind of silty bottom. And he concluded that the sonar remote-operated vehicle likely sunk and impacted the bottom of the loch, left this vague outline, stirred it up a little bit, and then took the flipper photo. And that flipper was just a picture of the lake bed. And the thing is that ROV was free floating, which means that it was subject to currents, which kind of made it rock up and down. So that could possibly explain the sonar hits. It might have actually been getting sonar hits off of the boat that was pulling it. And that would be the big, quote unquote, creature that it saw. Now, Rines and his crew would later rescan the loch 3 years later and come away with 2 more underwater photos. One of these showed what he claimed was the monster's horned head, and one showed a long-necked body at a distance. Both of these photos are subject to the same issue as Rines' others. The head photo looks quite a bit like a tree stump. Nessie has some very strange protuberances coming off of its head. The body photo, I'll admit, is more compelling, but when we talk about the size, there's nothing that we can really use to compare it to. It's likely small and close to the camera, not far away. A lot of people think it's just a fish.
That's the difficulty with pictures and stuff underwater. You just have no context.
Totally. Yeah.
You need a body.
Yeah. It's not like he has an outstanding track record of capturing these great photos. You know, what do we have? We have a tree stump that's he claimed to be a head. We have a couple fin photos that he clearly doctored to make more compelling than they actually were. You know, it's just, there's not much there.
Yeah, it feels like you can say, oh, I took all these pictures and sonar images of the lake, but if you don't know what you're doing or you're not controlling for the equipment being used correctly, you can have a lot of data, but that data could essentially mean nothing because you haven't controlled for anomalies or misuse.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, you see it time and time again, right? The issues don't get the press. So all the headlines were like flippers and here's a scientific name for the Loch Ness Monster, right? This whole thing caused a resurgence in interest in the Loch Ness Monster in the 1970s, mid-1970s. Darren Naish writes about the state of Loch Ness research at the time and says, remember that the early 70s were an incredibly opportunistic time for those involved in the hunt for Nessie, and they wrote about it in high spirits. So everybody's looking for the next big break in the Loch Ness Monster hunt. And a self-proclaimed wizard has just given them their best evidence yet. This clear photograph that seemingly confirmed Rhines's theory that was published but hotly debated in Nature. There's a plesiosaur living in Loch Ness. Shiels is like, it's right there.
I would believe it more if it was just some random person taking the photo. But it's a wizard taking the photo. There's so much to be gained. I don't know.
But this is one of the crazy things, man. 20 years will go by before anyone stops and says, now who took this picture?
Yeah.
Let's actually look into him. Because also, to his credit, he didn't actually call himself a wizard when he sent in the picture. He just said, I'm Doc Shiels, here's a picture. But for the first time, he's actually doing it himself. He actually gave ownership to this photo himself rather than calling it Mary F. or something. So let's talk about the Shiels photo. We don't know for sure, but it's likely that he showed the photo to Tim Dinsdale because we know that they had been in contact. Dinsdale then likely contacted Robert Rhines in Boston at MIT because we know that Shiels' photo ended up there for analysis. And that was like the best possible thing that could have happened for Shiels, right? Rhines is the foremost investigator at the time. And he has the leverage of not only the Academy of Applied Sciences, but also the Loch Ness Investigation Bureau and MIT. Now, in addition to all of that, Rhines is trying to get traction for his own theory, and he's trying to get backup that will support his Nature article and help refute the rebuttals that he's getting. And this is great for Tim Dinsdale, too, who is so committed to this long-necked, camel-humped version of Nessie that he's come up with. Shiels has delivered exactly what these guys are looking for, and they ran with it. They were so committed to this authenticity that they ignored the glaring issues with it, like the fact that the mouth seems like it doesn't really have a throat, or the white blob at the base of the neck.
I understand Doc Shiels not following scientific protocols, but
Right.
isn't it sort of on you as a scientist or as somebody who's looking into this stuff to actually find reasons why it's not true?
They should have.
You should be looking for the opposite of what you're doing, which is cherry picking the affirmative. Really should be.
If we're talking about good scientific research, you should create a theory, and then you should try to debunk your own
You should
theory.
poke holes in it.
And in failing to debunk your own theory, that's when you publish.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, that's scientific method 101.
Yeah.
Does that mean that every single scientist does this every time they publish? Unfortunately, no. That's why we're in some of the messes that we're in. But yeah. But yeah, I mean, Rhines and Dinsdale absolutely should have done this, but they were so desperate to find anything that supported their theory. They were just grabbing, as you said, cherry picking. They were just cherry picking all of this and saying, but look at this. This proves it.
Man.
So let's talk about this white blob at the base of the neck. When asked about this, Shiels said that it was a floating can of Guinness.
So specific.
Yeah, he knows. He's like, I know that from 100 miles away.
But I feel
I
like
could tell one anywhere.
it's kind of, I could pick it out from anywhere. But the thing that I actually find really fascinating about that is I feel like the opposite is true. So his theory is that the grainier the photograph, the more it can be believed. I think the more specific an object, the more people are like, oh, okay. Like if you just said, I don't know, probably just something floating in the lake, people are less inclined. But if you say specifically what it is, people are like, oh, okay. Especially if it's something so normal.
Because then they trust you, right? They say, oh, yeah, he was there. He saw it was a floating can of Guinness. Makes sense. The one Nessie just finished. Yeah, why not?
All the litter in the lake.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
I don't know how Dinsdale and Rhines reacted to this, but my guess is they probably just ignored it or treated it like a joke. But they really, really should not have. And their commitment to it caused Shields to double down even more. In 1984, Shields published his own analysis of the photo and the creature in the Fortean Times. In an article titled, Is Nessie a Giant Squid?, he explained that he believed that the Loch Ness Monster was in fact a big, lumpy cephalopod. It was a huge squid that was a cross between a cuttlefish and something that looked like a sack of potatoes, so it had humps on its back and a fin tail and a couple short tentacles on the end. These tentacles jutted out of like its head, and that was the source of all of the long neck sightings. At least that's what Shields claims. And these weren't a head at all, but they were like an uber long tentacle.
This sounds like something a 4-year-old would come up with in
Yeah.
preschool.
But
Like,
do you remember how you were like, he wasn't very creative with the monster? It was just a
Yes.
big owl. Now he's getting creative.
I appreciate it.
Right.
I applaud him. Yes.
But it does sound like someone, like a 4-year-old drew something and he was
does.
like, great, that's what we're going to go with.
Yes.
It also explained the white blob or the Guinness can because Shields now said that it was the creature's eye right at the surface level. So it was sticking up with one eye out of the water and then sticking one of its like proboscises in the air and smelling around. And that's what he caught a picture of.
I think he has to, at this point, be on the train of, if you're going to decide that this is real, then I can't help you. Because, I mean, truly, what you just described is not a thing. It's not even like, oh, this sounds like something that exists, but bigger or more wild. It's like a completely made up, weird sounding animal that wouldn't even function properly.
It doesn't make any sense at all.
Yeah, that's a big lift you're asking us all now.
Also, what is it doing? Squids don't do that. You know, like cuttlefish don't like fling their tentacles into the air and stuff. Like
matter.
it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, but that doesn't matter.
Yeah, right. That's probably the least problematic
That's
part
the
of
least-
it.
Yeah.
I know, they're not like submarines, like putting their little periscope up and looking around.
Yeah. This is a new creature entirely.
But
Anyway.
yeah, so this is why he says that there's no real mouth, because it wouldn't have a mouth because it's just a tentacle, you know?
Oh.
All of this. So anyway, in 1990, Shields published a fictional autobiography of his monster hunting days. This was called Monstrium, A Wizard's Tale. And the book detailed his encounters with various cryptids, including the ones we've talked about. The whole thing feels much more like Alice in Wonderland than, say, Bernard Heuvelmann's more scientific On the Track of Unknown Animals. So, like, he wasn't trying to make it a scientific book. It was totally like a grimoire, right? He was never opaque about this at all. He wrote in the book, "I must emphasize the primary importance of surrealist thinking in the business of monster raising. Monsters are essentially surreal." And this is kind of his theme, his artistic statement for the entire last decade. The whole text, which combined real-life experiences with Gaelic and pagan folklore, clearly just intended to be a fun little romp in the fantastical, as a way to formally close the door on his monster mind experiment and turn his attention to the next phase in his art. And after the publication of this, he stops taking pictures of cryptids. He turns and just starts doing more painting and more traditional artistic expression. By the mid-1990s, Strange magazine writer Mark Chorvinsky started looking into Doc Shiels' Loch Ness Monster photograph, which has been, it's now almost 20 years old. It's been making a circulation for a long time. And Chorvinsky is the first person to actually look into Doc Shiels, the man, as well as just Doc Shiels, the photograph. By the way, Chorvinsky is a fantastic Fortean writer. He's very keen skeptic, loves the weird, the supernatural. He was a magician in his youth. He was a big inspiration to me and this podcast. He was the one who finally uncovered the fact that Shields was a surrealist artist and was running this surrealist project. And so Chorvinsky published this in his magazine. And Shields was just kind of like, yeah, that's right.
That's awesome. Good on him, man. Good on Shields for being like, you got me. Like, absolutely.
Yeah.
We've talked about this a couple times during this series, but his commitment to the art or the bit during the project was like wholehearted. He wasn't doing it anymore. He wasn't doing that bit. The project was over. So to him, it's fine to admit that it was a bit because like the art piece is finished. There's no need to continue.
Yeah.
Right.
He didn't deny any of it. But I think it's an indictment of cryptozoology and Fortean research that it took almost 20 years for someone to uncover a barely hidden secret. Shields was playing pranks, and the community fucking fell for it. Hook, line, and squid.
Not just playing pranks. He published 2 books, one at the beginning and one at the end.
That's right.
He published a book setting it up, and he published a book ending it.
Yes, he did. Chorvinsky set up an interview with Michael McCormick, the puppeteer, who admitted that he didn't know how Shields created the Loch Ness Monster Muppet. This is why I don't think McCormick was actually involved in it at all. But McCormick did offer some insight into potential methods. He said a year prior to the photo release, he had a conversation with Shields, and Shields said this: "I am thinking of creating the pesty, like pesty, carved from expanded polystyrene, just a head, neck, and a hump, very light. We could make it quite large, weighted at the bottom, attached to a kind of wooden raft." In the process, McCormick also said that he had been working on doing photographic overlays as well. And what you do there is you photograph an image like a monster model on a glass plate, and then you photograph the background. You lay the plate of glass on top of the other photograph, and then put them together with an overhead projector. And you can line up the images that way. And this technique has actually been used in decades in the film industry to combine 2 things together. And it's pretty easy when you're just doing a single photograph. So some people think that that's what Shields did to create this Loch Ness Muppet idea, that he photographed just the water, photographed the monster on a glass plate, then put them together. And some people even say that when they look at it, they can see ripples behind the monster's neck.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Where maybe it was a little bit transparent. The final projection wasn't quite right when he did it. Some people say that it might have been a polystyrene model that Shields created, like he was talking to McCormick about. I kind of think it's that because of the shadow on the water. It would be really, really hard to fake that shadow. Not saying that he couldn't. I mean, Doc Shiels was an incredible artist. But my guess is that that would just be a lot of length to go to for this. And it would be much easier just to float something in the loch.
Definitely.
Which is probably what he did.
Yeah.
McCormick also, in this interview, offered a little insight into Shields' mindset while building his Monsters Rogues gallery as well, and said, Doc's idea was not to create a single hoax or photograph, but rather to devise a well-structured monster campaign involving much work over many months.
He was successful.
He really was, yeah. On his most coy days, he would claim that those monsters were real, whether he, conjured them or not. On others, he would gladly take credit for the whole thing as an artistic experiment and a multidisciplinary surrealist piece. In a 2014 interview with Monster Mind author Rupert White, which was probably over a pint, Shields said, the Loch Ness Monster business came about because people said, can you do this? And I said, of course, I can do anything because I'm a wizard. I claim to be a wizard, which I'm not, of course. I'm just a painter. The thing is to turn up at the right place at the right time, and things occur. And even here, I think he's playing both sides. He's admitting he's not a wizard, right? He puts himself where it's most advantageous. But I don't think he meant it exactly the way it's written. It's not like he put himself at Loch Ness. The right time for Shields wasn't the day that, Nessie stuck their head above the water. The right time to publish a crystal clear color photograph was on the heels of Robert Rines' underwater images and his Nature article. The right time was when Shields' relationship with Tim Dinsdale allowed him to stand shoulder to shoulder with these legitimate cryptozoologists and pretend to be one of them. From the very beginning, Shields was playing a magician, running a very complex scheme of misdirection and conjuring. This is all his magic act. After retiring from the Monster Mind experiment, Shields turned to painting and to other art. And he established Tom Fool's Theater of Tomfoolery, which produced several plays of his own writing. Among these was a play titled Distant Humps, a musical about hunting sea monsters.
I thought it was about long-distance relationships.
Shields' painting and sculpture series, Sea Heads, occupied most of the rest of his life. These were pseudo-abstract aquatic monsters that changed and evolved as he aged. And some of them look remarkably similar to the strange cephalopod Nessie that he created. The series was shown in France in 1997, and he described the paintings by saying, Sea Heads is a personification of sea stuff, direct and simple. Sometimes saltily androgynous, it can be Poseidon. It sings like an octopus and stings like a jellyfish, a harpooning, medusoid, coleartite, or jellyfish. Doc Shields is very lyrical when he wants to be. Despite his rise in his later life as a painter, he could never shake this wizard persona. Not that he really wanted to. His neighbor, an occultist, swore that everything had really happened, that all of the monsters were real, and that he had raised them all. And that Shields was just kind of downplaying it in his old age. I love this quote from him. I told her I was a charlatan and she denied it. Oh no, she said, you have real powers and all that nonsense. I said, no more than anyone else, my dear. She was a bit too involved in the occult. She was a practicing occultist. She was quite theatrical while I was more authentically theatrical, because I am a cheat, you see, or pretend that I am.
Yeah, wow. And this is the difference between the two kinds, right?
Yeah.
We always talk about this, like the people that really buy their bullshit and the people that are just hoaxers.
Yeah.
And this is a good example of a hoaxer who admits he's a hoaxer.
Mm-hmm.
We don't really see that a whole lot. And there's an integrity to that, and I appreciate that.
I also think there's a third category of people. There's people who have convinced themselves that what they're doing is real, or that it's fine to be doing what they're doing, even if they don't quite believe it, maybe. I think there are also the people who legitimately think it's real. They never started thinking it was fake, you know? Mm-hmm. I just feel like there are people that are into the occult who are doing it because it's like a type of religion to them, you know? They don't think it's fake. They never thought it was fake. They started practicing to see if something would help them in a time of need, or because they were curious, and then they proceeded with it. I don't know. I feel like there's a third type of person. Maybe those people, do those type of people exist in this world? Like the people who make themselves famous, or they're just like the hoaxers and the people who buy their own bullshit in the ones that have made it to the top?
I think that they use the third type. I think that they rely on the credulity of the third type to be successful. That's how you get the charlatans, and that's how you get the artists, if you want to call them that, if you want to classify them that way. Because you need that core of people that are like, yeah, I believe in ghosts. I've seen ghosts all my life, whatever. But they're not actually trying to get gain from it. They just buy it.
Yeah.
On July 11th, 2024, Tony Shiels died at his home in Kerry, Ireland. He was 86. His obituary announcement described him as artist, musician, actor, magician, writer, playwright, showman, and wizard of the Western world.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
I like Wizard of the Western World.
Wizard of the Western world.
Somebody should write a bio on him and call it that.
Yeah. Also, I didn't realize he died so recently.
Yeah.
Just last year. Yeah.
Wow.
He lived a long life. Like,
Yeah,
wow. Despite like all the stuff he put himself through.
The wild life that he had.
He lived a long life, yeah.
Maybe he just slightly pickled himself.
Yes.
Longer.
I think he would say that he cast a longevity spell upon himself.
That's right.
Yes.
Tony Shiels left an indelible mark on the world of cryptozoology. As a boy, he'd been fascinated by the illusions conjured up on seaside stages. As an adult, he'd conjured up his own, a series of monsters, responding to his commands, creating a bestiary of occultism. His audience was not just the general public, but legions of monster hunters who would spend decades debating his authenticity. Shiels' carefully constructed magic show fooled not only the public, but some of the most prominent cryptozoologists of the time. He understood how powerful it was to show people what they wanted to see. That power, reinforcing a person's hopes and desires, brings their guard down. And once you've got them there, you can lead them anywhere. In magic, there's a saying: the best time to do the dirty work is when no one's looking. If you ask somebody, do you want to see a magic trick? They're going to start looking at your hands. They're going to put their skeptical glasses on. But if you just show them an illusion without calling it magic, you'll fool them every time because they're not ready for it. Shiels never claimed to be doing magic. He claimed to be hunting monsters. And people laughed, and they took it as a joke, and he used that humor to cover for the dirty work, to spring the trap. And then they believed him. I think about magic and the reactions people have when they see a really good trick. Some are baffled. Some try to figure it out. Some swear you're gifted with otherworldly power. Magic is an art form, much like any painting or sculpture, and I think Doc Shiels proved that tenfold. He crafted an intricate series of tricks that developed into an entire persona, one which itself became the illusion over time. Supported by a complex series of evidence from both his own photographs and his accomplices' stories, Shiels built a canon of occultism and helped to reshape the field of cryptozoology for a more modern age. And that's the story of Doc Shiels. Yay. The Wizard of the West.
Yeah.
I loved him.
Yeah.
Such a character.
He's great. Yeah.
Man, I want him to be like my grandfather, as long as he doesn't make me go naked and do weird things.
You never know. 70s were a time.
They were a time.
I just love the story of an artist really accomplishing something great.
Without the gatekeepers, I feel like there's such a gatekeeper problem, and there always has been in art, but I think it's worse than ever, where it's like you just can't. It's really hard to kind of get ahead as an artist, especially now. And I think that it's really great that he was just like, fuck you, I'm going to do my own thing. The surrealist art world mainstream doesn't accept me. Well, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it my way. And he did it. And that's really amazing.
And he struggled with that at the beginning, right? Like he was always up against these gatekeepers and people didn't understand what he was doing.
Yeah.
And he was too weird. They kept rejecting his pieces and his exhibits and stuff because he was too weird. And so he just did it somewhere where no one could reject him anymore.
Yeah.
He was able to present the art the way he wanted to and was incredibly successful. He was way more successful than he would have been if he just put stuff in a gallery.
Yes.
Further thoughts on Doc Shiels?
No, I feel like the world has lost the light of a really creative person. I'm sad he's gone.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, he was a cool dude. You should check out his sea heads if you get the opportunity.
Yeah, I want to actually.
Yeah. I think they're cool. They're definitely when you look at them, you can totally tell that they're from him. Like they're weird, they're silly sometimes. They're just like everything that is his personality wrapped up in a piece of art.
Awesome.
Yeah, they're cool.
Let's check them out.
Maybe someday. I would like to get one. I don't know if I can find one, but I'd love to have one someday.
That'd be cool.
Well, thank you all so much for listening, for joining us on this weird little escapade into the world of Doc Shiels.
Yeah, thanks everybody.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And yeah, Katie, thanks for coming along.
Of
It was
course.
awesome.
It was a great story.
I thought you'd like it. So next time we're going to be doing something a little bit different. We're going to be back in America. We're going to be a little bit more modern. And let's see. What can I say about our next series? Pack your beach towel. I'll tell you that. Pack your beach towel.
And look to the sky.
Yeah. All right.
Ooh.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Be safe out there. Next time. You stand on the beach at sunset, sweating in the damp Florida heat, a Polaroid camera clutched in your paralyzed hands, while above you, a glowing craft hovers in the humid darkness, a messenger from another world. Thanks for listening to Slaying Monsters, the 40 in History podcast. If you like the podcast, there's a couple ways you can show your support. You can tell your friends, you can leave us a rating and review on your podcast platform, or you can head over to slayingmonsterspodcast.com and click on the Support Us button to leave a donation. For questions, suggestions, and other feedback, reach out to us, slayingmonsterspodcast@gmail.com, and stay up to date by following us on socials at Slaying Monsters Podcast. Your support helps us grow, and we are truly grateful to have our listeners and community.